Good morning, welcome to the UK Column. Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 18th of December 2012 and it's just gone noon. Good morning, Brian Gerrish.
I'm going to say afternoon. What is it with you?
I don't know.
Okay, it's after 12. It's the afternoon show for UK Column Live. We've also got Mike Robinson here in the studio, of course, who's hiding behind the technical equipment at the moment.
Afternoon.
What's
Good
the weather
afternoon to
doing,
you.
Brian?
What's the weather doing? Well, I'm
Doing?
pleased to say that it's roughly a blue sky in Plymouth, a bit of sunshine. It's still quite cold and there's a bit of a chilly breeze, but not too bad. So there we are.
Lovely one.
Okay, well, I think, Mike, you're taking us away with a look at David Cameron bowing to the Queen.
Yeah, so the Queen is to attend Cabinet today if she hasn't already done so. Of course, all the media is crowing about it, about how wonderful it is. But I wanted to point out one or two things. The Cabinet Secretary, that was Gus O'Donnell, in his previous guise, he's been making a comment about this and saying that it's testimony to the Queen's neutrality that David Cameron felt able to invite the monarch to the UK's decision-making body for the first time in more than 200 years. That's according to the Telegraph. Of course, we should point out that you know, when the Queen was crowned, she took a coronation oath to uphold the laws and customs of the people of this country and the entire Commonwealth, and she's done none of that. She's instead stood by while those very laws and customs have been systematically destroyed. You know, I've just got to say, no one is above the law in this nation, not even the Queen. And in my opinion, she is a traitor to the oath that she took.
Well, I have to say, having served my Queen and country for 21 years, that I agree with this. I mean, the proof is that we know that the Queen has accepted mediatisation, so she's been happy to hand her powers away, and of course those powers have been stripped away by the European Union. It was not within her power under the coronation oath to do that, so effectively we're now under a monarchy that has committed treason and is prepared to go on committing treason.
Well, according to the Telegraph, Jane Ridley, who's a biographer of, who wrote a biography of Edward VII, said that the Queen could be trusted to remain politically neutral, and so there was no danger of it becoming a constitutional problem or being constitutionally inappropriate. And of course, there is a difference between being politically neutral, because civil servants are all supposed to be politically neutral. There's a difference between being politically neutral and serving your nation as a monarch and maintaining the oath that you took when you took that monarchy on. So political neutrality has got nothing to do with whether she signs into law statutes which are unconstitutional and are not the laws and customs of the people.
Yeah, well, I will very happy to say on air that I've thought about this long and hard over many years as to what's actually going on in this country, and I've come to the opinion that we are being utterly betrayed by the monarchy. I was watching a very interesting film last night to do with the death of Princess Diana.
Unlawful killing.
Unlawful killing. Of course, it's been banned in this country, but there are copies available. And if you're able to get your hands on one, then do watch it, because it is quite staggering, the information that comes out around the death of Princess Diana. And for me, watching that video and watching what was blatantly a cover-up over an unlawful killing, because that was the returning verdict of the jury at the time, we are living in a despicable period where we're being utterly betrayed by the royal family. And in my view, there's no question that the senior members of the royal family know what is happening and condone it. To shake the hand of David Cameron really sets the seal on it for me.
You can understand why it was banned and why it wasn't, because it's been out, I think Keith Allen made it a couple of years ago.
2011.
2011, yeah. And it was shown in Ireland, it was banned over here, but you can understand, now seeing it, I can understand why they banned it, because if the British public saw this, there would have been absolute uprising.
Well,
so as many people as you can, Google unlawful killing, and it is out there, and make
if
your
you've
own
got
opinions.
friends overseas, they'll be able to get you a copy, but we'll be putting up some more information about that. It is a stunning documentary, shocking in the clarity with which it reveals events that went on around the death of Princess Diana, and of course were totally covered up, including by 2 senior police officers.
And the way the BBC took their stance on it, because it was all accidental death that came out in the press,
paparazzi.
wasn't it? Paparazzi, when it wasn't.
So there we are. I'm afraid we're going to give the Windsors a vote of 0. And what about this gentleman, Mr. Grayling? I think you're quite interested with at the moment, Mike.
Right, so he has been in, he's written a piece for the Telegraph and has been in a number of the newspapers and on BBC Radio 4 this morning, or at least people were talking about his article, and he's talking about human rights. The first paragraph of his article in the Telegraph read, "Anyone who ever wonders that what human rights should really be about should read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's epic portrayal of the brutality of the Soviet gulags under Stalin and his successors. Local Communist Party members were sent to brutal labour camps without trial for crimes as trivial as being the first to stop applauding at the end of a meeting. Peasant farmers were driven off their land and literally dumped at the end of a railway line in the heart of Siberia, left to fend for themselves or die. People were tortured to death in the basement of Moscow's Lubyanka prison." And he goes on to say, "It was the brutality of parts of Europe in the 30s and 40s that inspired Winston Churchill and other democratic leaders to come together and forge the European Convention on Human Rights, signed in Rome in 1950. It set out some of the fundamental principles of a democratic nation at a time when there were all too few of them in Europe: the right to life, the right not to be tortured, the right to a fair trial. That original convention is a carefully crafted expression of how a nation should be run." Now, this was...
Sorry.
Do you have the Daily Mail right there?
We do indeed, yeah.
Right. So no, not the no. There was, okay, you don't have it right. So that's maybe my fault. But there was in the Daily Mail article that covered Grayling's posting on the Telegraph. Sorry, I've lost my track here.
Keep going.
The Mail was pointing out that Grayling's remarks are the strongest condemnation to date of the controversial European Human Rights Court from a Tory minister. But of course, this is all a lot of nonsense, because the whole Tory strategy of demolishing our constitution and demolishing and promoting this idea of human rights is it's a complete U-turn of what human rights is really about. So constitutionally, we already have a Bill of Rights, but the Tories want to create a new Bill of Rights, and the new Bill of Rights is based on the idea of the European model of human rights, which is that humans don't have any rights except for the rights that we until we're given them. Yeah. Constitutionally, in this country and in the United States, the idea of the Bill of Rights, particularly the US Bill of Rights, but ours as well, is based on the idea that the Bill of Rights limits government rather than limiting humanity. So, Grayling is talking about people having human rights, but with those rights come obligations. And there are no obligations to the state. The state has obligations to the people. That's the way it should be. That's what a nation state should be about. Obligations to protect and look after its people, not obligations of the people to the state. So this whole argument of Grayling's is this European-style 180 degrees out argument that human rights are something that people are thrown by the government. If you're lucky, you might get them. And he's really holding up, the Soviet Union and the travesties of the 1930s and 40s as an excuse to bring in this type of human rights legislation. It's not right.
Well, of course, the other thing is twisting really what Churchill was speaking about, because Churchill was keen to see Europe stabilised. He didn't regard the UK as being part of a European supranational state. So there's some disingenuous comment in that article anyway, in my opinion. But it's very interesting that we've still got Britain full of Tories who think that the Tory government is putting Britain first, when of course they are absolutely going down the road to shut us into Europe and locking the door. That's the key bit going on at the moment.
they are also pretending that we don't have a constitution in this country. And of course, the reason that they pretend that we don't have a constitution in this country is because a constitution limits their power. They presume that they've got the equivalent of the divine right of kings. It goes without saying, actually, that they don't believe in God, so they can't presume a divine right, but they do presume that they've got an all-encompassing, sort of omnipotent right to control our lives in every way, shape, or form. So that's why they pretend that we don't have a constitution, and that's why they're pretending that we need to have a new constitutional arrangement with a new Bill of Rights, get rid of the Act of Settlement, get rid of the Bill of Rights, get rid of Magna Carta, and this is the fundamental basis.
The big lie.
The big lie, exactly, yeah.
Okay. You're on to your next subject there, which is the IMF Bank. We got there.
Okay, so this is Ambrose Evans Prichard's latest article in the Telegraph. Basically, the IMF's epic plan to conjure away debt and dethrone bankers. And what he's saying is, I'm just going to quote a couple of bits out of this. One could slash private debt by 100% of GDP, boost growth, stabilise prices, and dethrone bankers all at the same time. It could be done cleanly and painlessly by legislative command far more quickly than anybody imagined. The conjuring trick is to replace our system of private bank-created money, roughly 97% of the money supply, with state-created money. And the first sort of feeling you get about what he's talking about was actually referring to the likes of the Bradbury pound and talking about some form of national credit. But what he then goes on to talk about is a report from the IMF, which is trying to re-establish what was called the Chicago Plan. And there's much that would make people think that the Chicago Plan is a great idea, because it's talking about government-created money rather than bank-created money. It's talking about the end of fractional reserve banking, and it's talking about a lot of things. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into the detail, and I think we need to do something on this in the not-too-distant future. Maybe in the next issue of the paper we'll do something on this. But I would say that if Ambrose Evans Prichard is pushing this idea that it's not a good idea, and there are reasons why the Chicago Plan is not quite what it seems and isn't quite as anti-bank as it seems. So we'll go into that in some more detail in a couple of days or whatever. But in the meantime, I recommend people read this article and also read the IMF report.
Right, but in simple terms, Mike, is this article about trying to diffuse the fact that they are beginning to understand that people are waking up to what needs to be done?
I believe that's exactly what is going on. This is a controlled opposition article.
Yeah, so it's a sort of twisted smokescreen, because they know that the moment we speak Bradbury pound, that is factually accurate. It's a precedence. It shows that it can be done.
Well,
so they're now trying to twist away from that subject.
Yeah, what they do is they create something which provides bait on a hook for people. So they talk about an end to fractional reserve banking. They talk about writing off debt. They talk about a government-created currency. But it isn't quite what it seems. So, but it requires more than we've got on this programme to go into the detail of that, so we'll do that in the not-too-distant future.
And we'll say again, if you're not aware of the Bradbury pound, have a look on the UK column website, and you can download what we think is a good quality little e-book which explains exactly what it is, when it was used, and of course we see immediately it could be used again if David Cameron's government and the Chancellor, of course, weren't lying to us about what is and is not possible. On the subject of gas, and we'll let you off after this one, Mike. Basically, The Guardian here, extraordinary article. I'll call up a bit of text, but inflation rates forecast to drop. Analysts expect a slight fall in the rate for November to 2.6%, but says energy price rises will push it up over the next few months. But inside the article, it's quite interesting. It says inflation in the UK will drop back. There's the third paragraph here. The impact of energy bill increases from supplier SSE will be offset by the effect of steeper utility bill rises in November last year. I've read that sentence several times and I still can't understand what it's saying, because it seems to be saying that two things increasing produce Well, I don't know what it's saying. Perhaps viewers and listeners can tell me. We've got the big 6 energy companies announcing price increases, and the other energy companies have already done it. We've got the rate of inflation unexpectedly shot up from a 3-year low, and that's been described as a nasty surprise. So somebody very surprised that we've got inflation. And if I just call up a bit more of that article, what are they blaming it on? Well, they're blaming it on university tuition fees and a jump in food prices. So this is an incredible article, in my opinion, from The Guardian. I don't understand it. It's a jumble of facts and figures. But if you've got any views on what they're trying to do here, please tell us.
Well, they're going to come back at a later date and say that inflation unexpectedly rose because they're expecting it to fall. Well, inflation is not going to fall unless they fiddle the figures even more than they're doing already.
Yeah.
And there's so many indications now that inflation is expected to rise, and not least, as we've mentioned on a couple of shows this week, the fact that the Bank of England and the Chancellor now want to abandon the 2% inflation target for the Bank of England. So they obviously believe that that target is unattainable again in the foreseeable future, so they don't ever want to go near that again. There are other countries, including Japan, are now also reassessing their inflation targets and setting higher targets. So this is a nonsense article, and it's
designed to confuse people.
Yes.
Yeah, and of course the Guardian is a government-sponsored paper, effectively, if you look at where the money comes from. And we'll also point out that the Guardian, of course, via the Scott Trust, was backing the Media Standards Trust, which has been calling for even more government regulation of the press and free media. So the Guardian, I'm afraid, if you read it, is a very disingenuous newspaper. We'll be looking at them in more detail. And we've got George Osborne here. I think you flagged this one up.
We're
going to allow you to come into the
Thanks.
comment.
Apparently, the Tories have got a new ad campaign running, and it's against the so-called scroungers. The Tories' new ad campaign is the most shameless attempt, according to the New Statesman, I think it was, attempt yet to turn the strivers against the scroungers. This ad is going to run in 60 Conservative margins, whereas Labour has highlighted the number of families receiving working tax credits is higher than the MP's majority. 60% of real terms cut to benefits will fall on working households, and according to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the average one-earner couple will be £534 a year worse off by 2015.
Yeah.
And so this ad campaign is basically making anyone who's on benefits feel guilty.
Well, I think it's doing something else, because basically they've created the whole climate of benefits. They've encouraged people to take those benefits. Then we cut the benefits away, and then when, of course, people can't cope because they've had everything cut away from under them, then we turn people in on each other. Yeah. So this is very, very nasty politics, which is designed to have people who have still just got it.
But there's no jobs anyway, for the people who are going to be on benefits, only part-time jobs. Yeah,
this is where this man is another liar within the Tory party. But this is deliberate policy to collapse social order and common sense in the country. Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, I would just like to say that the worst culprit for pushing this agenda that I've seen is the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail these days has got some really good articles in it, but when it comes to the whole benefit cheat thing, the whole benefit cheat this, benefit cheat that, they are really pushing that agenda at the moment, and it's government inspired because they want to stop paying this money to people.
Well, I think what we're going to say here, if we move on to the next slide, is won't steal your thunder.
This is disgusting. Granted that thieves have gone into Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital and stolen presents, but my thoughts on this is that not what our government are doing to us? So many people are struggling just to get through Christmas. We can't afford to give our kids the presents that we want to give them, and really it's just, as far as I'm concerned, I think the government's far more to blame, and calling the police for the money they're taking and Europe are taking from us and families.
Obviously this is tragic and disgraceful that somebody's taken the presents
Yeah.
from the children at Great Ormond Street. You could argue that perhaps those people are so desperate because of exactly what you're talking about, which is the government stealing money and benefits from the nation while it's giving away infrastructure to private companies, and of course filling the coffers of the private banks. All of this could be stopped overnight if David Cameron would simply take control of money away from his private banker friends.
Yeah.
And that's pretty unlikely, isn't
Yeah.
it? What's happening with vaccines?
Well, it's not so much vaccines.
Oh, sorry, this
is the private company that is looking after out-of-hours services. And apparently it's putting patients at risk, and this is according to doctors. Harmony is the name of this private healthcare company. It provides services, out-of-hours services for doctors all over the country. It's the largest private provider of the NHS for GP out-of-hours services. And allegations are being made by senior doctors that its service in London is so short-staffed, it's regularly unsafe. Harmony, which has contracts covering 8 million patients across large areas of London and southern England, is also alleged to have manipulated its performance data, masking delays in seeing patient and other missed targets. Apparently a 7-week-old baby with suspected respiratory infection died in November after repeated calls to the out-of-hours service over several days. And it's just not good enough, really. A gentleman called Dr. Cavalier, who was the former clinical lead of Harmony, apparently resigned in January because he felt unable to be responsible for the service, which he believed had become unsafe after cost-cutting and messing up the clinicians' shifts, etc. So he stood down because he was concerned about this company. But by the looks of it, the NHS aren't that concerned because they look after 8 million odd people.
Well, but we've got government policy here again, which is to actually take control out of the public sector with the NHS and give it to unaccountable private companies who are driven by profit. So I don't see why the Guardian is so surprised about this. This is government policy at work. And of course, the ultimate agenda is to collapse the NHS.
Yeah.
So I think we can see, despite this poor performance, we can expect to see more companies like Harmony
you've
picking
got
up contracts.
You've got Harmony looking after GP service. Is it Serco who look after the cleaning and everything? Is it Serco or is it one of the other ones?
No, Serco's in a lot of hospitals.
They're in a lot of hospitals looking after the hygiene of things, and we've got MRSA all over the place. It's just...
Yeah. Well, take away the public infrastructure, put it into the hands of private companies, it's ultimately in the hands of the bankers. So well done, Mr. Cameron and George Osborne. I knew vaccines was here somewhere.
It's here. There's been... well, no, this isn't actually. This is about plastic bottles and BPA.
Okay, all right.
Get it right, Mr. Gerrish. It's from the Waking Times. It's something that I'm an asthmatic, and I have some certain allergies, and plastic bottles, and it's a word I couldn't say earlier, and we got it down to phthalates.
Possibly.
Well, it's an industrial chemical which is found in plastics, and it has devastating effects on the human body. With an emphasis on reproductive health and the health of young children, the studies offer shocking conclusions. There were consistent indications that this plastic product may increase the risk of both developing allergies and asthma in children, even cause neurological, reproductive and metabolic and social problems. Known as endocrine disruptors, these chemicals are found in a number of household products, such as plastics, carpet, nail polishes, colognes, shampoos, perfumes, hair gels, etc., etc. Children become exposed to this in the womb, apparently. Studies that have tested the chemical level in the third trimester of women have found that infants, toddlers and older children suffer from a variety of health implications stemming possibly from being exposed to this chemical. Columbia University has done studies and found the same, as has the University of Rochester. It was banned in children's toys years ago. Do you remember lots of toys were taken off the market? Because I thought it was lead-based, but apparently this plastic was taken off the market in 2009. But it's still about for baby stuff, but it's still around, and it's in in our drinking bottles, it's everywhere.
But we're not seeing mainstream press and media talking about these subjects at the moment. We're always focused on what the pharmaceutical industry can develop in order to try and counter what's seen as a disease.
Yeah. It's a very good article. It's very, very long. I just wanted to skim through it because, as we say, the mainstream don't talk about these kind of dangers. So it's in the Waking Times. I think it's one of their lead articles. So please have a little look.
So these are chemical problems, and I'm sorry if I've confused anybody
with
by mentioning vaccines. The Express here has got an interesting article which is about the Muslim community expressing their unhappiness with rules to try and impose gay marriage, and Muslim leaders have demanded the same legal exemptions as the Church of England in legislation to introduce gay marriages. Now, we wanted to comment on this from a slightly different angle, but the key thing that's happening, of course, at the moment is that Cameron and the rest of his cronies are slowly but surely putting the church under government. So far from our governments having to obey the laws of God, and we start with a spiritual angle and what is right and wrong and what is common sense, what we're actually seeing is that the churches of whatever faith can only operate if they are given an opt-out clause. So effectively what the government is doing is bringing faith under the control of the government, and that would take us very firmly into the communist or fascist type regime, when of course a few more steps and we're not going to tolerate any true spirituality. So we're just going to encourage people to think about this from that slightly different angle. Mike? Yeah,
one of the things that's fascinated me about a lot of the commentary from the politicians on this issue and on the church in general, and particularly on women bishops and so on. And I'm going to say that I'm not a Christian, so I don't have any particular vested interest in this statement. But the thing that really has angered me in a way is how the politicians are promoting the idea that the church has to move with the times and has to reflect society. So what the politicians are saying is that as society rotates its way down the plug hole into moral degradation, that the church should follow it down there. And it seems to me that if you're going to have a church, then the church should be setting the standard for society rather than following it down the plug hole. And I just wanted to highlight the fact that politicians are demanding that the church constantly lower and lower and lower their standards.
Yeah. Well, I will remember. Comment by Dr. Mohammed Nazim from Birmingham Central Mosque, who met David Cameron on one occasion and said that he was a very polite and nice man, and they had a perfectly reasonable discussion until the subject of gay marriage came up, where Mr. Cameron changed personality and became what could almost be described as aggressive and said, well, you'll just have to do what we tell you. That was the message from the Conservatives. So there's more to this than meets the eye. It's not simply to do with the rights or wrongs of gay marriage. This is to do with the state moving in by stealth to control faith. So do have a look at that one. Moving overseas, the Express here reporting that we've now got Syrian rebels fighting Palestinian groups. So we would just like to keep people thinking that David Cameron at the moment is congratulating himself because he's now got more support in the world to pump arms into Syria in order, as he said, to help reduce the bloodshed. So Britain is going to be paying for arms to go into Syria to reduce the bloodshed. Well, of course, what Mr. Cameron is dead set on is removing President Assad from power, and the UN has already declared that the chances of him getting political asylum are very slight. So the UK column is warning now that we see the attention of David Cameron and the British government is to facilitate the murder of President Assad. Of course, in the background, we've got Tony Blair, who's well known for his huge efforts to bring peace to the Middle East. But The Independent has come up with a wonderful article here where the Palestinians have given their verdict on Tony Blair. I'll bring this up in text. Palestinian officials say Tony Blair shouldn't take it personally, but he should pack up his desk at the office of the Quartet representative in Jerusalem and go home. They say his job and the body he represents are useless, useless, useless. Well, I think we would like to say to the Palestinian officials that Tony Blair should take it personally, because it's quite clear that wherever he's been, there's been trouble. And I think that we're very interested in the fact that David Cameron is now living 1 week per month, each month.
No, Mr. Blair, not Mr. Cameron.
I beg your
Mr.
pardon.
Blair. And I've got a couple
They're
of
so similar.
They are. I've got a couple of little stats. Timeline to Blair's peacemaking. Again, this was in... it's in the same article in The Independent. 2007, Tony Blair appointed Middle East envoy on behalf of the EU, US, UN and Russia, hence that's the Quartet. 2008, launches a peace plan for Israel-Palestinian conflict based on improving economic cooperation. March 2009, on a visit to Gaza, Mr. Blair calls on Israel to ease its blockade. September 2011, Mr. Blair warns that a bid for statehood at the United Nations by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas would be deeply confrontational. And October 2011, Nabil Shaath, one of the senior aides to President Abbas, has harsh words for the Palestinian leader, accusing him of talking like an Israeli diplomat. So not Palestinian leader, it's meaning Mr. Blair talking like a Israeli diplomat.
Yeah.
He should be at The Hague.
And I think he's renting hotel rooms for a staff of 15 in
after the last
Jerusalem.
over 4 years, he's been renting 15 rooms at the American Colony Hotel for his full-time staff. But Mr. Blair has put down more permanent roots in 2011 by renting the penthouse of a new office building east of Jerusalem. So he rarely travels to Gaza, apparently.
And I believe the Met Police are still providing him with security.
Yes, they are. 24-hour security detail on secondment from Scotland Yard.
OK, well, we just have a final look at Mr. Blair.
But apparently he doesn't earn any money out of this.
I'm sure he doesn't. Well, here's, this is from the office of Tony Blair. This is how he sees himself at the moment. And amongst other things, apart from saving the world and saving the Middle East and saving himself a lot of money, Tony Blair is urging the UK to shape the future of Europe, and UK Column Live would say, we certainly hope the UK does by withdrawing from Europe as soon as possible. The Mail has been picking up on the subject of vulnerable children, and this is quite a remarkable article because it's being presented as though this is something special, a joint inspection by Probation Ofsted and Education and Training Inspectorate has found that children have been repeatedly moved around the country, leaving them unable to put down roots or build a new life. 1 in 3 children was put in a care home more than 100 miles away from where they were from. So lots of statistics. I'll just bring up a couple of the key ones here. Care home placements can cost up to £250,000 per year. That's per child. But inspectors found many staff had woefully low expectations for the children in their care. We would suggest that's because the children are simply regarded as cash cows, and provided they can get them in through the door, they can make £250,000 a year. Inspectors estimated that there are between 1,000 and 3,000 children in care who have committed criminal offences. That's a very, very interesting statistic, isn't it? Because the accuracy of their work is such that it's between 1 and 3,000. So presumably they've really looked at things carefully. And then if we have a look at this bit, we are saying that councils have been shipping the children away. The lives of many of these children has been characterised by family breakdown, neglect and abuse. And then the system is failing the children in terms of how it's looking after them. And it's very interesting that 3 key agencies have had to go to all of this investigation in order to find out what the internet has been saying for years, that our children are being abused in the so-called care system. And we'd also like to point out that Ofsted is one of the very organisations that turned a blind eye to the abuse of youngsters at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. So sheer hypocrisy or another smokescreen story here. I think it's a smokescreen. BBC coming under a bit of pressure here. This is quite an interesting headline, again from the Mail. BBC wrapped by watchdog for serious lapse of care using a child actor 13 for violent police TV drama. Gregory Piper played a violent gang member in the hit drama Line of Duty. The 13-year-old swore and tried to chop off a policeman's fingers. Ofcom criticised the BBC for a serious lapse in care for the young star. Well, we will also point out that the BBC declined to look at documentation relating to abuse of young people at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. And we understand that senior editors in the BBC have been warned off from investigating child abuse cases. So what we've got here is the BBC showing their true colours, which of course is not only pumping out foul language and brutality, but ensuring that children are drawn into this mess. Yeah. If anybody thinks I'm being too hard, perhaps you'd like to email me with your reasons why. Immigration and welfare, not Europe, are the driving issues, meaning that Tories are defecting to UKIP. And apparently Lord Ashcroft, a very reliable man in the Tory party, has surveyed 20,000 people, and he's come up and said that these are the two key issues that are driving these defections. Personally, I think this is another smokescreen because David Cameron will be desperate to get people's eye off what he's actually doing with Europe, and I think that his drive for a referendum, which we'll be moving on to, is part of this. But is UKIP going to grip the real issues in this country, which are massive fraud and corruption? It remains to be seen, but we're not seeing signs of that at the moment. Mike, you're interested in this. Cameron finally conceding that Britain could quit Europe as he prepares to offer a referendum on the subject.
Well, is he going to offer a referendum on the subject? Is he going to do it before 2015? I think it's unlikely. I think he's going to promise another referendum, and he's going to offer that in the next manifesto. But whatever referendum we get, if we take part in it, or if we at least don't register our opposition to more further European integration, and I think that's what we're going to end up with, because they will set the questions.
Yeah, and if we don't get the answer right the first time, just as with the Irish, it'll be set again. So I think the key thing is we're now seeing Cameron's true colours as he does everything possible to lock us into the mess that's the European Union. I'll just bring up this photo. It's from the same Mail article. I just had to show this. We've got Boris Johnson and Mr. Gove, and I wanted to say that here is a picture of two British politicians in 2012, and perhaps it gives us some explanation as to why the country is in such a pitiful state. We've had the sad news in this independent article of the funeral for Jacinta Saldana, who's been laid to rest. What is critical in the article, which is mainly, I would say, padding around what's gone on, is that Jacinta's husband is still saying that they haven't received the information that they've wanted and requested from the hospital. So there's definitely a wall of silence about what has actually happened to this lady, and we can then start to ask the question, why is there this wall of silence? Perhaps it brings us back to the film about Lady Diana.
Exactly.
Police officers in Britain have been receiving more and more weapons, and in particular automatic weapons, as they become a paramilitary force. And this was just an interesting little article that we've got police officers loose in the country who are so incompetent they're leaving ammunition sitting on the top of their car.
Yeah.
But the public are being asked to watch out for the missing rounds. They've found some of them, but they've suggested some of the bullets could have been trapped in the tyres of large vehicles and transported elsewhere around the country. No doubt that nobody will face the face the music for this, but it'll gently be swept up by the not so independent police complaints commission. And on the subject of guns, this has been obviously a tragic incident at the school in Newtown in the States. But we wanted to bring it up because when you analyse what's going on, none of the mainstream press and media articles are talking about the batch of all of these tragic suicide killings, where those carrying out the killings are on psychotropic drugs. So we're immediately seeing Obama here calling for control on guns. This is part of what Obama said to the nation. In the coming weeks, I'll use whatever power this office holds to engage my fellow citizens, from law enforcement, mental health professionals to parents and educators, in an effort aimed at preventing more tragedies like this. Now, there are people at the moment that believe that these are triggered events, and in particular in America, these are to remove guns from people so that the American public will not be able to defend themselves as Obama increasingly turns America into a dictatorship. But there's a lot to think about with these. We were simply saying that these cases are not as straightforward as the mainstream press would have us believe. With an eye on the clock, I think we better end on this one, but Labour is getting a little bit upset that the Leveson inquiry and the results and government control of the media is not going fast enough, and the party wants substantive discussion amid fears that ministers want to delay decisions on press regulation. Labour's getting panicky that as time goes on, of course, the public are beginning to realise the dangers of people like Miliband, Clegg and Cameron controlling the press, and so they're desperate to press forward. So here, this is what they've said: this has to be a substantive discussion and an extended meeting. It's been nearly 3 weeks since Leveson was published, and so far we've made very little progress. We've put forward proposals in public, we've had nothing from government. So here we are, 3 deeply untrustworthy politicians, all now clamouring to work together to censor the mainstream press and media. Pretty dangerous if they achieve it. Actually, we have one slide which I better put up because it vindicates some of the things you've been talking about.
Okay then.
And this is to do with Frankenstein Foods. It's all great GM lies.
Yeah, well, I don't know if viewers remember the story we covered a while back with regards to the rats that were fed the GM corn, and the French reports coming out to saying that they're greatly dangerous. Well, I haven't read this article. You've read this article. But they're backing it up. They seem to be quoting really what we were talking about a month ago,
it's
or so ago.
A very interesting article. This is the key bit. As Environment Secretary, Mr. Patterson should know this, or at least have a small army of civil servants who can tell him. What they're referring to is the fact he should know what the real truth is, and it is not true that every steak you buy is full of GM products. But this is the key bit, and yet he still rode into attack, desperately trying to convince everyone that GM crops are here, that they're being fed to British farm animals without causing any harm, and that there's absolutely nothing to worry about. Is it coincidence, I wonder, that he did so after ministers and senior civil servants met in the summer with some of the giants of the biotech and agrochemical world to discuss how best to advance the cause of GM crops in this country? So we're going to say on that point, Mike, well done to the Mail, because they flagged up the absolute hypocrisy of what's going on. And here we've got another government minister who's clearly in bed with the very people who are trying to sell these Frankenstein food additives.
I mean, you are. I mean, you're saying the country is under attack. The British, everybody is under attack in our foods, in our air, in our vaccines,
in the NHS.
In the NHS, there isn't one part of our lives where something isn't affecting us.
Well, I'm going to say many years ago I started off talks by saying that basically the country was being attacked. We stand by that statement today. It's just that it's becoming clearer to see that the attack is actually coming from within within Westminster, and those attacking us are our own politicians.
And the attacks are so blatant now, and the people who can't see it, please ask them just to watch UK Column Live, get some real news, get away from the mainstream media, and wake up and subscribe. Thank you.
Or any of the other free media.
Exactly.
We've run well over time, but that's the benefit of UK Column Live and no licence fees. So
Exactly.
we hope you'll join us tomorrow.
And it's the UK Column's Christmas social tomorrow evening at the George Pub in Plimpton. It would be great to see some viewers and listeners there to join us in music,
if we can
celebrations.
squeeze them in. If we can squeeze them in.
Yeah,
Yes, if
that'd be good,
if there's any local Plymouth
BBC.
BBC people, we'd love to see you there.
Exactly.
Okay, thanks
Bye-bye.
for joining us. Bye-bye.